Hello, everyone. Welcome to my TED Talk. Today, I'm going to talk to you about risk factors for addiction. So, let's start with the biggest one here, right here, which 50% of it pretty much just comes up to genetics. But to actually get a little bit, more in depth with that, like what does that actually mean? So, there's kind of like two parts to this that I like to think about. One is basically like what you actually inherit from your parents, or I guess the second part kind of will be, but like specifically like inheriting a likelihood of addiction from your parent. So like, if you had a parent before, they gave birth to you, they had like an alcohol addiction, or if they had, XYZ drug addiction, then you are more likely to be addicted to that. But then there's also the second part of this, which you kind of do inherit from your parents a little bit. Um, is it would kind of come down to maybe a specific mental illness that you have. So one that comes to mind for me is like ADHD, and if you have ADHD, that genetically gets passed down to you, or genetics is a high risk factor for that alone. And what happens there is that with ADHD, since it's a like pretty much your frontal lobe is not developing properly or is not being like managed properly, it impairs your thinking, your ability to kind of like orchestrate the rest of your brain in order to do tasks. And so people with ADHD, it's kind of become a meme in like pop psychology, but like, they're kind of like they just seek the next dopamine hit, the next dopamine hit. And so that makes them um, more likely to be addicted to substances. But so what about the other 50%? So here we got four main things that we're going to talk about. Um, so the first on the right, we'll go from the right. So by itself is just age. Kind of like I was talking about with ADHD, is that you know your frontal cortex isn't thinking isn't up there, isn't developed properly, and so you're not able to kind of orchestrate the rest of your mind in order to make smart and good decisions. And that's definitely true for younger people. They're not fully developed yet, and so yeah, they're more likely than someone who say is 30, 50, or whatever to develop an addiction. So the next thing is going to be the drug itself, actually. And there's kind of two components to this. So the first one is going to be accessibility. If you were to think, it's like if you had to say, if you were someone who maybe just lived a normal suburban life, let's say you didn't have like necessarily any pulls to like a drug or an addiction or anything, then you're more likely you're going to more likely come across something that is like out there, right? So something like porn, like you're more likely to get addicted to porn than you probably are like heroin. Because if you do heroin, you got to go and like find like a group of people and stuff that actually do it, and you got to find someone that sells it. And so it's kind of more like a culture that you have to get into, and it's also a price point too. So if you're a kid, like you're more likely to do kind of like the cheaper drugs like weed or whatever, or maybe you buy like a pack of smokes off someone, or you do like alcohol because you steal it from your parents or whatever. And then like I said, like gaming, most parents let their kids game probably too much. Porn's another one. I don't know, there's probably some other cheap ones or like more accessible ones that I'm not thinking about. But like, yeah, you're more likely to get addicted to that just because the barrier of entry is so much lower. And then the second thing is going to be the potency of the drug. And so this kind of almost makes up for the accessibility because usually the less potent drugs are cheaper. So like I was saying, like weed is generally not as accessible or weed is more accessible than something like heroin, but heroin's going to give you way more dopamine and a way higher hit than weed is. But yeah, so the potency definitely does matter there. And so moving on, we kind of got two that are clumped together, but they also are separate. So the first one is going to be history of trauma. Um, so this is going to tie, like I said, this is going to tie directly into socioeconomic status also. But for a lot of people who do drugs, they usually do it, or they have any addiction. It's usually to get away from life. It's, hey, I have something that's bothering me, and for people with history of trauma, it's usually reliving that traumatic event and causes a lot of negative emotions, makes them feel shame, sadness, depression, and so they want to get away from that. They don't want to deal with it anymore, and so they turn to substances to do that. And then the next thing is going to be socioeconomic status, which um, it's pretty much the same thing for a lot of these people. They might have medical debt, and they might, have like a shitty job that they don't want to do, but they have to do, or maybe they have to work overtime. And so they're just like, fuck it, Oh, I probably shouldn't cuss. Sorry. But they probably don't want to do it. So they turn to drugs. And yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.